So without further ado, Michael.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be able to talk to people who are doing this work every day. And I see some old friends who have been involved in this work. And I wanted to explain how we do this work, and at the end, we'll have a PowerPoint of workshops that I've facilitated in various cities, including St. Louis, just to give you a sense of what it looks like in the room. I'm going to just, read about our process, and I can make it available. I can send it to the GBC, and you can get it as a written copy. But I just thought I would just read you a bit of what we do in every project. Okay. All of our projects, of course, differ in scope and type, but the following is the typical approach that we use at WA to develop, evaluate, and to design project, and these are in distinct phases. When we work with the public, we use a similar workshop format to facilitate meetings with them and get their input into design decisions. Facilitators will meet first as a group session, all inclusive, and then break into smaller groups to discuss specific items, then go back into the plenary sessions to report out the outcomes. And generally, we would make accommodations for children, and because these are likely to be evening events to get people there, who may be working during the day, we serve light food and drinks. And when you see the slides, you'll be seeing people eating, because these are sessions that happen during the evening, and we want to make sure that they don't have to run out and get something to eat. So the first phase is just understanding the project. We introduce the facilitators and the participants from the city, developers, et al. The existing conditions is in the first phase. Maps of the proposed sites and the neighborhoods they inhabit. Use city, district, and GIS maps in enough detail that participants can locate their houses. It's very cool when they walk up and say, "I live here." And then that gets them invested. We have photo panels of streets and distinctive neighborhood elements. Sorry. Excuse me. Codes and zoning. Have these available for review. Site information, traffic, infrastructure. This includes bus and rail lines. How are these neighborhoods connected? The developers or agency then presents the aspirations for the project. However, general ideas about what the project will come from the public. And this is the critical point. They should see themselves as partners in the outcomes of their neighborhoods. They can tell us what ideas they have about what works in the neighborhood, what doesn't work, and what they would like to see in their neighborhoods. So we do not ever walk in the door with a plan for the neighborhood, ever. Talk first, listen, and then design. Building types and precedents. Where has this been done before in the city or the country? Discussions and public response to create a mandate for the designers. Here's where we get to find out what it is they want us to do. At this point, we break into 10 or 15 person discussion groups to tackle specific issues like transportation and traffic, safety, housing types, security, infrastructure, open space, playgrounds, and recreational space. We found it's easier for people to comment when they're in a small group versus a large public gathering with 125 people. In groups of 15, they can talk. After 45 minutes or so, the group the work group in the plenary session, and the community members themselves reporting out. At the end, the architects would be given a written mandate for what the community wants to see in the next phase, which would include concept design. So the second phase of the workshops are exploring the options. We have our mandate, we generate some ideas for them to review. And this is about 4 weeks later. It's flexible, but it gives the design team time to process the information. So in the plenary session, it's tools and rules. We just let them know what the object of this next session will be. Where all positions are valid, we're just there to catalog the responses to the options for generated by the first workshop. Team formation. Once again, we break out into smaller groups for giving specific responses to the option. Then back to the plenary group session where we narrow the option and they give a mandate to the designers. Phase 3 is making decisions. Again, 4 weeks or so later, flexibly, just so we have time to winnow down the options. There's a visual preference survey we usually use, architecture and urban design in the plenary session. Building type survey, whether if it's housing, then it's singles, duplexes, mixed use structures. Discussion and public responses. And there's when we select the preferred option. And this can be done in the plenary session. In the workshop 4, we take that decision, we come back and present it back to them. We say, this is what you decided. And there's plans to scale, renderings and illustration, material boards, and refining plans based on the comments. And the 5th phase is really just refining it and publishing it. I have been in many sessions where after the project was done, we go back, the architects go back and show them the images that they voted on during these sessions to show that we were the promise keepers. We didn't just have these meetings just so they could have meetings. We took those ideas and turned them into the final project. And so when we toured the buildings or the complex, they had the sense that not only were they listened to, but it drove the design. So with that, I'm going to stop and take some questions.
Susan, I don't know if you were just agreeing with what Michael had said or if you had something you wanted to add.
No, I was agreeing, but also too, I have a question, Michael. Susan Armstrong, how many people did you have facilitate? And was it based on the size of the, I mean, if you were in breakouts, you needed people to facilitate the information coming in. That's my question.
As you'll see from the slideshow when we get it set up, sometimes we have, I don't know, 125, 150 people in the room. And so 10 or 15 seems about right, because in 45 minutes, you can get around to everyone and everyone can speak. And that's the point. As the facilitator, it's in the small group session, it's your job to make sure that everybody comments so that it won't be just the loudest voice in your in your breakout session, that you manage that so that everyone feels like they can have something to say. And you record that on, on the big flip charts. Everybody's words get cataloged and recorded.
Michael, this is Hannah. How does, I can understand on very large infrastructure projects, this process. When they're much smaller projects. So for example, St. Louis has a lot of stormwater diversion projects that end up being 3 or 4 square blocks of green infrastructure. So it's a much smaller community, and so it might be a much smaller gathering, how do you work with a much smaller group?
Well, I would still, even if there are 20 people, I would still like to have a breakout session, even if it's 5 or 10, and 5 in each group, because the object here is to get everyone to comment. And if you have 20, 25 people, and only one person is standing on top of a chair and declaiming what the project should be, you will be aware as the facilitator that some people are not commenting. And this format, the breakout, gives it a kind of a structure where you can get everyone to comment. And just to give the breakout sessions a kind of a different flavor, you can break up the approaches for each breakout session. So for instance, one would be, okay, here's this MSD project. Where is this on the walk to school? Does this have any effect on the businesses in the neighborhood? What about parking? I've seen some in St. Louis where parking spaces have been taken up for the rain garden. So it's trying to find a subject so they can comment on it specifically. And then when you get back together as 25, they report out about what the specifics of their group. So I really, if you, this is in the eye of the facilitator too a little bit. If you see that you are getting a lot of response, breaking it up is also helpful, because then you can make sure that all the points get recorded rather than 25 people trying to talk at the same time.
Michael, good morning. This is Lois. How are you? Long time no see. When you have a community meeting with folks that might not be familiar with your topic, and also when you have repeat meetings, how much time do you set aside to lay the groundwork, explain definitions and terminology and those sorts of things? I presume you always have limited time, but you want to have people informed about what you're talking about. How do you handle that at the beginning of the meeting?
Well, I have on one of those flip charts, written out a short version of these phases, just so that you can point to it and say, phase 1, we're just trying to understand the project. And phase 2, exploring options. Phase 3, making decisions. So it's in a shorthand form on the wall to tell people what we're doing. And classically, what happens is that in the second group, you'll get people who weren't there at the first, but I've seen amazing buy-in. So by the third meeting, the community members themselves will tell the newcomers walking in what this is all about, even though it's on the wall. You do have to do a shorthand, say here's why we're here, but it's often been gratifying to see the members themselves help organize the meeting once they've been there for a couple of sessions. So yeah, I try to say, to remind people what this particular phase is about, and then dive into the specifics of that phase, whether it's generating options or making decisions. And I believe there is there's a the PowerPoint of some of these meetings?
Do you want me to go ahead and start scrolling through those photos? Cool.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
please.
Great.
And then we can just take questions over them because there won't be any sound.
So Michael, as these start, this is Hannah again. I've heard about a situation where someone came to a meeting. It was a small project, but a couple of women their sons had been killed, and they simply said, "We don't want anything in our neighborhood. You can never bring back our sons. We don't want your money." How do you address that kind of emotional opposition?
Well, yeah, I have been in some pretty tough meetings where there is fear, there's division, including some where we've had police in the meeting. And I have to believe in the higher purpose. Let's say the idea is to build new housing in the neighborhood. And that new housing is to replace, I know a lot of you have seen some neighborhoods where they're, sort of crashed down houses with only 3 walls left standing. And you have to try to make this focus on that higher purpose. We're here to rebuild your neighborhood. And I can, and certainly understand the pain, but that's why the listening, sometimes it takes, in some meetings that we've had, it took about 45 minutes to let people express themselves before we could get to the point of the meeting. I mean, the point of the meeting is to get their involvement and not just wash our hands and say, well, that's that. Okay, you don't want this meeting. We'll just go to the zoning and just do it anyway. I don't know that there is a excuse me. I don't know that there is an automatic answer to how you address people's pain outside of giving them some time in that meeting to express it. Because what I would not like to see is that, developers crowd into the neighborhood and rebuild the houses, and yeah, that's a good thing, but they didn't have anything to do with it. So this doesn't have a cookie cutter answer. It's a very something that you have to see on the ground. For instance, this project that you're seeing here now, that's actually a public housing project that at first, as terrible as it was, they did not want the housing authority to touch their crappy old housing, because what they were afraid of is as soon as you do something like this, you're pushing them out. And we had some pretty tough discussions with the people who lived in the existing public housing and then the neighborhood that was growing up around it, where they had to engage each other. It got pretty tactile at some point. But at the end of this long process, we got it built. The neighbors stuck together, both the neighbors who lived in the public housing and the ones that lived across the street. And by the way, this is one where the police were involved, and they had those concrete bollards blocking the through traffic through the neighborhoods. I don't imagine that. Where has that ever happened before? And at one of them, I knew those bollards were coming out. I knew we were going to reconnect the street grid, but I didn't want it to come from me. And at the end of the session of the process, both the cops, and the neighborhood say, those things should come out. We should be reconnected to the city grid. And I turned around and wrote it on the flip chart: reconnect city grid. But but the idea was that it came up from the community and addressed their fears of being pushed out or just move to another neighborhood so that the new developers could move all new people. It's a trust building exercise.
How are you able to engage as many people as possible in the community without them being able to be present? I know some of the struggles that that from some parents even have of even being able to go to their children's school, even break out time for that, and they have to engage them in various different ways of like allowing them time in their day to even get to that point of even their children's school. So how do you get them to a meeting that is about like designing?
Well, if I understood your question, if I understood your question, how you guys the meetings is critical. I mean, again, the meetings that you're seeing, they're up on your screen, and the one you're looking at now is from that neighborhood, that Humboldt neighborhood in Portland. We had to arrange a time when it fit in with a school schedule, or we had to have people who would manage and watch the kids in another room, doing homework or face painting or what on a Saturday. But it's trying to make accommodation so that you can get the largest number of people there, and recognizing that everyone won't have exactly the same amount of time and to come to meetings. So this is there's no automatic answer to that either, except to say what you're trying to do is to find a way to have the most participation in your meetings. For instance, this meeting here and this one, this was the clockwise from the top left are all in Portland, and this was a neighborhood where talking about a mix, terrible public housing, but there were, as you can see, Somali immigrants with children, living in this terrible place, and the neighbors were churches, Christian churches, Jewish community centers. There was a kind of a progressive synagogue on one edge. I mean, it's about as mixed a neighborhood as you could see. But we had to find time for all of them to be there so that at the end of the day, we could go back and say, we heard you, and here's what we heard you say. And in this picture, on the bottom right is one of the city commissioners, because he wasn't there to talk. He was just there to show that the city was going to be was behind the idea of getting neighborhood opinions in. This was not a political rally. This was, how do we get the community involved?
So Michael, you really have to build time into the schedule to do these types of meetings.
Whoops, we're just about.
I'm sorry, Michael, can you hear me?
I'm sorry, Hannah.
On your planning, on the schedule for the project, you really need to build in lots of time for this planning phase, even if it's a small project with a small budget. That's a question.
Hannah?
Yes, Michael.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your last comment. We got cut off.
I was just saying, even if you have a small project with a small budget, you still need to build in significant time for these early meetings with the community. You really need to add that to your project schedule.
Yes, you do. I think the maybe a way to look at it is this: if you don't have that time added to your schedule, it's you worry about budgets, you worry about schedule, but what I found is that if you don't find a way to engage, the community can rise up and stop the project later. So this happened in a project in, oh my gosh, our New Orleans project in post-Katrina New Orleans, and it was another place where they said, we don't know if we want this, if what's going to happen is we get pushed out. And so in order for them to have any kind of, that's to show that we should not take yourself too seriously, and I try not to. But the cost is that the public does have one big superpower, is they can stop your project cold. So yeah, it might sound like, we got to find another $25,000 or $50,000 to hold these sessions on a small project anyway, but if we don't bring them along, the project may be jeopardized. So I would say see it as necessary. It's not just fees to the designers or the cost of permitting and all that. Well, maybe like permitting. You're saying this is a necessary cost to make sure that we have everyone on board. And then when you have to go to City Hall to talk about the project, the community stands up and says, we want this. And what an amazing thing to have. So it's not just the architects and the designers are being paid to be there. It's the community members whose trust you've gathered that said, we want this to happen. And then it's a pretty easy lift for the politicians at that point. And actually for the developers, because then that means they have some support they're going to have some support for moving the project ahead. So maybe my last word on this, everyone, is that when as a kid, as a 5-year-old, I lived in public housing, and all of this was in St. Louis. I'm from St. Louis, by the way, and all of this was all top down. But it was that way across the country. It wasn't just St. Louis. That's the way it was. You know, here's housing, you go into it. And the people from on high were, you know, had this grand idea about what this community needed. Well, what I'm trying to recognize is the hubris of that idea, where, you know, 4 or 5 people in a room can make decisions for thousands. Now, what I'm proposing here isn't a magic bullet, or yes, if you just do this, then everything will work. And it's a work in progress. And what we're trying to do is to recognize the hubris that came from before, where yes, we are all educated, we know about design, and we can make the decisions for you because we actually know how all of this works. I'm taking another tack, saying before you employ all of your wonderful knowledge and what the tram systems look like in Amsterdam or Paris, listen first to the people that you're designing for. You might find some surprises there. You might find, as I have in the past, some things that didn't occur to me until I talked with the people in that room. So you'll get your chance to design. You know, you're still, that will still happen. But first, talk to the community, listen, and then design. And don't take yourself too seriously.
Great. Brandon, did you want to wrap us up, or do you want?
Sure. I mean, I can. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I know we a little over on time, but this was a really great conversation, and I personally really enjoyed it. I learned a lot myself, and I hope that people will be able to take this away and this seed and help it kind of grow. I would really encourage everyone to join us in our next evening program, which is coming up. It is on Tuesday next week. Please check the details for that. It is about energy efficiency, and we're excited about that. It is going to be a virtual program again. We want to keep everybody safe on that. And thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much, Michael. It was great to see you
Oh,
again.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
One day I will be back in my hometown. I don't know when, but
yes, one day we'll all be in the same room again.
Yes.
Not a Zoom room.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Have a good rest of your Friday.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.